Jesus says that many express their eagerness to follow him, but not many actually do. Jesus says that following him is the difference between life and death. Here in Matthew chapter 8, the passage we're looking at this morning, Jesus explains what it means to follow him, and he also gives us a bit of a taste of what it's like. I think the reason that he does this is so that we would. So we wouldn't be naive about what's involved, so we'd actually understand who he is, so that truly knowing who he is would actually shape how we respond to him and have real implications for what it looks like to follow him this year. So I'm going to pray now that God might help us understand what's going on here. Now, please join me. Dear God, we are in awe of who you are. We're so thankful that you don't leave us in our own mess, but that you've actually entered into your creation in the man Jesus. Please help us to understand who Jesus is. Please help us to respond to him appropriately. Please help us to follow him wholeheartedly this year and for the rest of our lives. Amen. Our passage this morning begins in chapter 8, verse 18. We're told there's a crowd. Now, the reason there's a crowd is because Jesus has actually been doing these things that no one has ever done before, right? So you have a little quick look there at the first half of chapter 8. Jesus is healing every sick person with only a word, right? You got leprosy, paralysis, fever, even the demonic. It's just all gone in an instant. We get this little case of the centurion. Jesus shows us he doesn't even have to be in the presence of the sick person. He can just speak and they are healed immediately. Now, I think this is pretty crazy, right? Like, imagine if this was the case in Townsville today, in the Country Bank Stadium would probably be well beyond capacity, right? The Townsville Hospital, empty. Mater Hospital, empty. Every GP clinic, every physio, every dentist, every nursing home. In fact, I think you'd probably be pretty hard-pressed to find a single person in all of Queensland that wouldn't go to great lengths to be there, either for themselves or to bring a friend, if instant cure was absolutely guaranteed and freely available. But I think what's even more striking is actually what Jesus does next. Verse 18, when Jesus sees the crowd, he gave orders to leave to the other side of the lake. Now I want you guys to imagine for a moment that you're a follower of Jesus here. You might consider yourself a follower of Jesus now, but imagine with me that you're following him here on this occasion. You hear Jesus' orders go out. We're leaving. We're crossing over. And you catch yourself wondering, should I stay with the crowd or do I follow after Jesus? You feel a bit of the pressure to stay, right? You feel a little bit compelled by the masses. You might see a bit of the safety in the numbers. In fact, some of your good friends are choosing to stay. Maybe even some of your family might be sticking around. You aren't sure if you'll ever see them again. It's not really an easy decision. Will you follow Jesus as he leaves the crowd behind? But you've seen what Jesus can do, haven't you? There's no one else like him, right? So you begin towards the boats. But out of the corner of your eye, you see someone limping. As you turn, you hear others crying. And you realise there's still so many sick people here. How can we be leaving already? What is Jesus doing? What could possibly be more priority than actually setting this crowd free from their sickness? Then you hear one of the other disciples, they're talking about where we're headed, and you hear that we're going to the place of the Gadarenes. And you know exactly where that is. You know there's nothing worth visiting over there. In fact, the more that you think about it, the more you realize it's probably the last place that you want to go. That's Gentile country over there. That's a place of unclean people, that are rebellious, immoral, pagan, idol-worshipping people. So again, you pause for a moment and you consider, is following Jesus really my best option here? Now, I suspect that for many of us, this conflict of obedience is actually more familiar than we might realise. We're not following Jesus in the first century, are we? But as you reflect on your own experience of following Jesus in the 21st century, I think many of you know there's been times when following Jesus has actually meant stepping away from the crowd, even from friends and family. There have been times when your agenda for Jesus has actually been pretty different to his agenda, because you really do want him to stay and heal a few more people, but he doesn't. You've been praying earnestly for healing in different situations, and you know he absolutely could fix it in an instant, but he doesn't, and that's been really hard. There have also been times when following Jesus has meant going to places that you'd rather not go to, and relating to people that you'd rather not relate to. What do you think following Jesus this year will be like? I think if we're going to make sense of this experience, we need to just keep pressing into what's going on here in Matthew chapter 8. So as Jesus turns to leave, he has two different conversations about what it means to follow him. If you follow along with me, reading from verse 19, a scribe comes up to Jesus, and the scribe says, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Sounds really good, doesn't it? But Jesus says, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another disciple comes up to Jesus and says to him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." Seems very reasonable, right? But Jesus says to him, "Follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead." Now, what's really interesting about these two encounters is they seem to contrast each other. It seems that Matthew's actually been really intentional in putting them right next to each other. So you get the first guy, he seems to promise too much too soon. But the second guy, he promises too little too late. You come to the first guy and he's full of enthusiasm, right? "I'll follow you wherever you go." But he also seems a bit naive. But the second guy, he seems really realistic. He's got reasonable expectations, but he stalls and delays. And Jesus addresses them both with razor-sharp discernment. The eager scribe says, "Jesus, I'll follow you wherever you go." But Jesus says, "I don't have anywhere to go. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." I think it's a pretty fascinating response, isn't it? Because the Son of Man's also the maker and sustainer of the entire universe. So how's he saying, "I've got nowhere to lay my head"? I think in a way, Jesus says, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but I don't have a home here." Now, that's partly because I haven't actually come to make my home here. In John chapter 8, Jesus actually says to Pilate, "My kingdom isn't here. It's not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I'm not delivered up to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of the world. I don't have a home here." If you're going to follow me, you need to realize that this world is not your home either. This world's actually passing away. If you think that following me means housing security, then you're wrong. If you are looking for a safe place to settle down and get comfortable, then don't follow me. But I don't think it's just that Jesus hasn't come to make his home here. I think it's a little bit more than that. There is actually no place for him here. He's not welcome here. But when the King of all creation arrives, the finest animal feed trough is reserved for him to lay his head, isn't it? And to show him just how much we truly welcome our Maker, we spit on him and we kick him, we whip him, string him up naked on the cross in front of everyone to bleed out. Jesus says, if you think that following me means that the red carpet will be rolled out for you, then you're wrong. What do you expect following Jesus this year to be like? Now, I'm usually pretty enthusiastic and optimistic. I get pretty excited about all the opportunities in the new year, and I usually make the bad habit of biting off more than I can chew. And it's not that Jesus has set out to squash all enthusiasm, right, and just kill every aspiration. But he does want us to be realistic, doesn't he? There is every possibility that following Jesus this year will be really difficult sometimes. And it's really helpful for you and I to be aware of that. There's going to be times when we actually need to dig deep. Following Jesus isn't for the faint-hearted. It's not a playground, it's a battleground. Here we see that Jesus actually isn't interested in hiding any of the gory details. Right? It's full disclosure right up front. Don't sign up until you got your head around all the terms and conditions. Did you read the part where it says, homelessness guaranteed? When it comes to following him, Jesus wants us to be realistic and to count the costs. But then there's the second guy, right? He's not suffering from a bad case of enthusiasm. In fact, he seems very realistic, maybe even borderline unenthusiastic. He's fully aware that there are actually certain responsibilities that he ought to take care of, and he can't just up and follow Jesus at the drop of the hat willy-nilly, right? Seems pretty reasonable, doesn't it? And I think that's kind of the point. Try to think of a more reasonable excuse to delay following Jesus than this one. I mean, he's not just saying, look, I just want to have a little bit more fun with life, Jesus, then I'll come follow you. He doesn't say that. I'll get a bit more cash in the bank, then I'll come. He doesn't even say, oh, look, I'll get a little bit more established in my career, and then I'll take you following you seriously. No, this guy just says, let me bury my dad. But Jesus says, don't delay. Now, maybe his father was healthy and alive and he was just going to help him see out his years of retirement. Or maybe he was dead and just had to dig a hole in the ground. We don't know. But either way, the point remains, doesn't it? When the Lord of all creation says, follow me, you can't say, first let me, yes, but Jesus says, leave the dead to bury their own dead. I think at first this statement can come across a little bit unsympathetic, right? It's a bit unsympathetic to the very real and raw pangs of death that many of us have tasted firsthand. But we also know that Jesus weeps over death. And that ultimately he has come to remove death's sting once and for all. So it can't be that Jesus' emphasis here is actually making light of death. I think he's actually helping us to see that following him is so much bigger and so much better. Don't let anything get in the way of coming after me. What will it look like for you to follow Jesus this year? Are you all in? Or are there a few things you need to take care of first? Because Jesus says, follow me. And let those things take care of themselves. If there's anything at all preventing you from following me wholeheartedly, Jesus says, leave it. To the scribe, he says, don't be naive and just jump in without looking. But to this guy, he says, don't muck around either. There's too much at stake for that. Now, I often struggle with this kind of thinking. It's not that I am sort of questioning whether I should follow Jesus or not outright, but I do think to myself, you know what, I'll take following Jesus more seriously when I finish these holidays. I'll read my Bible a bit more after I get through this degree. I'll love my family a bit better when I finish this project. I'll pray a bit more when the Australian Open's finished. I'll be generous when I got a full-time wage. I'll be more regular at church and regular at Bible study when I think you get the idea, right? But you know what keeps happening to me? I kind of finish one excuse and then I just sort of move on to the next one. And before you know it, I'm just wasting time, just messing around. I'm not really following Jesus. I'm just following my own desires. I'm just doing whatever I want. When Jesus calls me to follow him, I can't say, but first let me. There's too much at stake for that. Now, eventually Jesus makes it to the boat. And we're told in verse 23 that when he got into the boat, his disciples, someone able to read that for us? What happens when Jesus gets into his boat? What do his disciples do? Got anyone? Come on, Gus. Followed him. Yes, Gus is always the one with the answers at youth group. His disciples follow him. Jesus gets in the boat, and Matthew wants to tell us his disciples follow him. I think this is interesting. I think it's his little hint of going, I'm going to keep showing you what it looks like to follow Jesus. Do the other two guys get in the boat? We don't know. All we know is that his followers are the ones who obey his orders, and he's just given orders to cross over to the other side of the lake. And so his disciples follow him. Now, when they do, things get a bit intense, right? And to highlight the intensity of this next section, the author uses the words, and behold, over and over again. Actually, 4 times over the next 12 verses. You'll need an ESV to see it, but it's verse 24, and behold, there arose a great storm. Verse 29, and behold, they cried out. Verse 32, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank. Verse 34, and behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. So, and behold, 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 behold. I think it's the kind of language that captures the intensity of the situations that Jesus' disciples find themselves in when they follow him. The first is a great storm. It's so great that the boat is being swamped by these waves. It's so great that the disciples, many of whom are experienced men of the sea, we're told are fearing for their lives. Yet at the same time, it's not quite big enough to wake the Lord of the universe from his sleep. In fact, when the disciples wake Jesus, he asks them, "Why are you afraid? Don't you know who I am? Don't you trust me? Where is your faith? Where is your confidence? You were willing to get in the boat when the water was calm, but now we see that was only because you thought you had things under control, didn't you? You thought you knew where we were going. You thought you knew what you signed up for, but now this storm has exposed where your confidence truly lies. And it's obvious you're not that confident in me. As the waves crashed over the boat, one of the disciples might have shouted, "Whose dumb idea was it to cross over the lake today?" But then they realized, oh, actually, this was Jesus' idea. We've ended up in this life-threatening situation because we've followed him here. What will it look like to follow Jesus this year? I reckon it might get rough. You might be out of step with the crowd and far from home. But Jesus says, "Why are you so afraid? Do you know who I am? Do you trust me?" And with a word, the storm vanishes. He just speaks and there is a great calm. This is who I am. Do you see it now? One moment the waves are raging in death and destruction, and then in the instant after, perfect rescue. Jesus says, "Follow me and I'll take you where you don't want to go, but I will take you to the other side. And when I'm finished, you will understand who I am." Things might get rough and they will get messy, but I'm so much bigger than all of it. In fact, even in the face of certain death, Jesus says, "I'm enough. I'm actually your only hope." The men marveled, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Now I wonder if in this moment any of them would have remembered reading in the scriptures, "The sea is his, for he made it." Psalm 95. "He gathers the waters of the sea as a heap, and he puts the deep in storehouses." Psalm 33. Or maybe he made the storm be still and the waves of the sea were hushed. Psalm 107. This is what the Creator does, right? And now Jesus stands on the boat in front of them. Do you know who I am? And even this event, as incredible as it is, it's just a little glimpse, isn't it? Just a tiny little taste of the wonder of the Maker. It'll only be one among many, many signs that will make it undeniably clear exactly who he is. Jesus has by no means finished teaching his disciples who he is and what he's come to do. That journey has only just begun. And now they arrive at the other side of the lake. But the situation's actually worse than anticipated, because not only are we in Gentile country, we're actually ended up in the worst part of the Gentile country. We're in the part that not even the Gentiles go to because it's too dangerous. Verse 5. They've arrived at the place of the dead. And as they walk amongst the tombs, they're met by two fierce demon-possessed men coming towards them. And these guys, behold, they cry out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come to torment us before the time?" It's really interesting because the disciples have just been rescued from a fierce storm, right? But now they're confronted by two fierce men, ravaged by demonic evil. The disciples have just said, "Who is this man that the wind and the waves obey him?" But here, the demons seem to know exactly who Jesus is. "What have you to do with us, O Son of God?" But what's even more interesting is how these powerful men respond to Jesus. See verse 31? The possessed men, whom everyone are afraid of, they don't torment Jesus. They're actually worried he's come to torment them. They don't dare lay a finger on Jesus. Instead, they beg him, "Please, Lord, send us into the pigs." Go. With the permission of the Almighty, they do exactly as they're told. The demons leave the men and they enter the pigs, and behold, the whole herd rush down the steep bank into the sea and drown. Now, Jesus has just rescued his men from drowning in the sea, but here, demonic evil is swallowed up by the sea. The herdsmen of the pigs, they flee and they tell everyone in the city what happened. And behold, the whole city comes out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they, like the demons, beg him, "Please go away." They beg him. I think it's this moment that we see there's another big theme running through this whole section. Fear. "Why are you so afraid?" Jesus says to his followers. They were afraid of the storm, right? Here, the whole countryside, they were afraid of these demon-possessed men. But at the end of the passage, there's a new fear that's unlocked. People begin to realize that there's someone far more powerful than a raging storm. There is someone far more powerful than the demonic realm. Even more powerful than death itself. The people realize that Jesus who stands before them, he's not a small force to be reckoned with, and they don't like it. In fact, they don't want anything to do with it, and they beg him to leave their region. What do you make of that? Are they right to fear Jesus? I think so. He holds all the power, right? Are they right to send him away? I'll let you decide. But don't forget, sending Jesus away means choosing to endure sick, broken bodies without him. He's the one who speaks, and everything is restored in an instant. Sending Jesus away means choosing to face the storms without him. He's the one who speaks and it's calm. Sending Jesus away means facing the demonic world without him. He's the one who says, "Go," and evil is swallowed up. Sending Jesus away means facing death without him. He's the one who rises from the grave and brings all his followers with him. Jesus says, "Follow me. Understand who I am. See me. See that I'm so much bigger than everything going on around you. Let go of whatever is holding you back." Yes, you might be homeless for a little while. It might get a bit rough. But Jesus says, "I am going to prepare a place for you, and I will come back and I'll take you there." Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you again that you have come to us in Jesus, that you've made it really clear who Jesus is. Please help us to trust him. Please help us to follow him this year. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. We're going to stand.